let's talk about the exam itself. All right, new format for the exam. I'm hoping that most of you have a sense of what this format is. You already have a scenario and some contract terms. A copy of the scenario and the contract terms will miraculously show up in the exam. In fact, it'll just look like a normal exam for those of you who've done multiple versions of a contract law exam, so I don't know what normal is otherwise. There'll be a cover sheet. It basically says all sorts of scary things like don't touch your pencil when you're reading, and you'll get shot and hung, drawn and quartered if you cheat and that sort of stuff. You have to sign your name on it, do all of those things. And then the next bit of it will be the scenario. So you've already seen it. You've got a copy of it. It's the same scenario for OUA as it is for face-to-face, but the questions are different. The exams are on different days. Everybody is treated ultimately fairly. We love our children the same by treating you differently. But just to make sure that nothing gets sorted out or problematic in the wash, the scenario and the contract are the same. So you have those already. You can write all over those. You can bring in whatever notes that you like into the exam. It's an open book exam. You cannot bring anything that connects to the internet. You cannot phone a friend. You cannot, use your smart pen. You can't use a electronic translation dictionary, but you can use pretty much anything on paper that you want to use. Whether it's your handwritten stuff, whether it's print out of slides, whether it's textbooks, printed notes, anything. Stop and think about that before you go into the exam. The first time to read the textbook is not in the exam, and I would suggest probably not even now. That now is a great way of procrastinating is to go and spend a lot of time photocopying things that might be useful. You would be better, in my view, rather than photocopying things that might be useful at a later stage and getting a very complex, who am I looking at, highlighting technique to make sure that you can find everything. At this late stage, you would be better off actually making handwritten notes topic by topic. Because the more active you are, the more engaged you are, the more it's going to go into the right bits of your head. If English is not your first language, or even if it is, a dictionary is not a bad thing. Now, you've already got the whole scenario, so if there are words in the scenario that you don't understand, feel free to use a dictionary. Try your legal dictionary as well, because sometimes words that seem like ordinary words can actually have a legal meaning as well. So we talked about one of those last night, if something had a material value. So it has a legal connotation, that term. So you can write all over that. If anybody tries to stop you from using stuff that is handwritten on or anything like that, you stand your ground and you get them to call. I am overseas, clearly, for the OUA exam. So if I were you and you're even vaguely worried about that, put WhatsApp on your phone, make sure I am your contact, and get them to call me that way. I will make sure that the GSBL guys have my Vietnamese number when I'm there, so they can call me. This university will happily take thousands of dollars for you, but will not spring for overseas calls very regularly. But you hold them to it, because at the end of the day, you can have anything in there that you damn well like that's not electronic as far as I'm concerned. Front cover of the exam page says that. It is actually very rare for the invigilators to get really bolshy about that stuff, but sometimes they do.
What would they find? What's wrong with written notes?
Well, it's just because you think about all the exams that they invigilate. Sometimes you're allowed to have only handwritten notes. Sometimes you're only allowed to have printed notes. You're allowed to have anything on paper that you like. Okay? Having said that, don't take in everything that you've got. Make sure that you're really familiar with the pack that you've got with you, that it's helpful to you, that there's some kind of index in it that makes sense to you. Think about that. So when you get in there, there'll be all that blah, blah, blah in front, then there will be the scenario, then there will be some questions. Depending on which of the 4 different exams I've written, there are 7 or 8 questions. So each question you're going to start, ideally, on a new page. Normally, I don't say this, but the time to save paper is not in an exam. It tells you to write front and back. Don't do that. Just write one side. A couple of reasons for that. One is, if I don't get back in time, it's much easier for the girls to scan them and send them to me, and then I'm marking them, as opposed to somebody else out of the blue doing it. Well, actually, some of you who've just got your results might want that, but actually, seriously, you don't want that. You want them all marked by the same person who knows what she was looking for. That doesn't really matter so much, though. It's just that when you're writing, you might, when you go back and check, or as you're going, you might think, I should have put that in. If it's blank on the other side, you can go and put it in and just put in an arrow, right? Like, if you've got really messy writing, write big and write every second line, okay? If it's scrawly and horrible, it's just hard to read. And I will try, I promise. I've never actually had to yet get somebody to come and sit with me and read their paper to me. I would do that, but I've never actually had to do it yet. But just think about it, like, in a good mood, happy, relaxed, can see that everybody has taken the time and effort to make it as easy for me to read as possible, versus dealing with something that looks like it was written by Hannibal Lecter in blood, on a spiky stick in tiny print, upside down. Like, it's hard. So think about that presentation, not because how it looks makes any difference to me. You can scribble out anything that you like. I almost got in trouble once for tweeting a picture of somebody's response to an exam question, because I really wanted the crowd to tell me. So basically, it was a 10-point question too, so it's worth 10% of the exam from memory. And the answer was just 3 letters, WTF. And I went out into the universe and asked the question, should I be able to give at least a point for being clear and succinct? And I think I should have, actually, just something, at least in that. But yeah, look, sometimes people write rude words in there. When they swear with me, it doesn't worry me. When you rant at me, I probably refer you off to discipline because I'm mean like that. Some people write me little notes. That's all fine. It's all fine. If you need to rearrange something, clearly it's not word processing. So if you've written something and you think, actually I'd like you to read it in the other order, then just tell me that. Kath, read this 1, 2, 4, 5, 3, well, whatever it is, just I'll read it in the order you tell me, okay? Because it's an exam, you're under pressure. So you've got these things already, and you're going to see the things in yellow on the day. So what kind of questions are you going to do? I've had the question a couple of times, will all the questions relate to the scenario? It's like, well, yeah, all of the questions will relate to contract law, and the extent to which they're really directly or indirectly related to the question will vary. Ultimately, the content of the exam is not terribly dissimilar to how it's always been. It's been in the past, and if you have a look at some past exam papers, you'll see there's usually 2 fairly deep hard problems. There'll be 1 critical analysis piece, and there'll be 3 to 5 short answer type questions. The short answer stuff is usually the stuff to warm you up a little bit, to just tell me about what a law is or what a principle is or something like that. So I would still suggest that you have a go at going through and getting comfortable with the past exams, because they won't be terribly different. This time you've got a big scenario, much more complex than the scenarios that have been in past exams, and little questions about them. So it might be as easy as tell Dennis what his rights are. Actually, I think the scenario has been written on the basis that you work for Dennis, so you can pretty much guess that you're not advising quick internet. I'll give you. But it might ask you things like, why do you think Quick did this, put this clause in? Or might give you a little bit more information and say, Dennis was really upset about blah, 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 and he spoke to someone who said blah, blah, blah. On what basis could Quick believe that they've got the right to do that, looking at the contract or otherwise? It might ask you to think about specific areas of the law that apply. So again, it's a standard form contract that most likely the consumer law applies to. You're not going to be asked to go and think about statutes relating to land or, I don't know, hydraulic lifters or telecommunications in a broad sense, right? Questions are going to relate to contract law. Now, I know there's a couple of people who think they've been very clever noticing, and they are very clever people, by the way, I don't mean to disparage them, but noticing things about that are different between the contract and the scenario. Yeah, the questions might relate to that, but they might not too. Whilst it's really good to be really familiar with the contract enough to know what's in there and where to go, the trick for you guys will not be too wedded to what you expect the questions to be. So I would strongly recommend against guessing what the questions are and pre-writing responses that you can copy out in the exam. It happens. Even when I'm not as generous as this, right? It happens. It rarely goes well. You have to, what I'm interested in is not how well you can copy things out, not how well you can research when you're not in an exam. What we are testing for in an exam is, do you recognise what kind of issue it is? Do you know what kind of law applies to this kind of issue and why? Can you actually, and once you've got those rules, can you apply them or distinguish them as you need to? Can you do that really difficult thing of linking the issues to the facts to the rules in one go? And it is tricky because a lot of things are only issues because of the way the law works. So if we talk about, let's use invitation to treat, for example, I like that one because most people before they start studying contract law have no idea that the people who are selling stuff are usually not offering to sell it, technically. They're inviting you to treat and you make an offer to buy it. So when we're trying to work out whether something is an invitation to treat or an offer, that's only an issue because of the way the law works. It's usually not an issue in the mind of our clients. So if you're getting really sort of mechanical about it and saying, this is what the facts are, this is what the issues are, this is what the law says, this is what the answer is, you'll only get so far. So what I'm looking for is under pressure, can you work out what might be relevant? Particularly as you don't know, this stuff could come from anywhere in the case, what are we doing? The subject. Eliza, please help me out. Talk. Stop me from talking.
Two things. One, will these slides become available to us?
Yes, they will.
And two, will we, you say that there's 7 or 8 questions, in terms of us being able to break down our time allocation.
Can I come to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I will show you how that works.
Okay.
And I can't remember whether it's 7 or 8, but I will tell you are right. A number of marks equals the amount of time I expect you to put into it. Just quickly, I hate slides like that with lots of words. I've got to see if there's something else that I have not spoken about in there. I don't think so. I've used different words, but that's what we've talked about. So, to Eliza's point, time is points. So, think about it. You've got 2 hours. I used to always mark the exams out of 120 because I love you all. And I think it's much easier if you've got 120 minutes and 120 points to do the maths in your head on the go. No, they said, Kath, it's too hard. We have to do maths. Oh, you have Excel. No, we have to do maths and it confuses the students. Okay. So, yeah, now I'm on a recording. Those of you who want to complain, just go. I've just slandered my boss. Actually, I don't know if it's slander or not. Some of you who've done talks could probably tell me. So basically, in a nutshell, 1 point equals 1.2 minutes or 72 seconds. Forget that. Think about 1 point as a minute. Have 20 minutes slack. And by slack, I mean to go through, do things like highlight the cases so that I know it's really easy for me to tick off that you found cases I've been looking for that help me give you marks. Do you think about whether or not what you said at the beginning is the same as the conclusion you ended up with? Often, you would not believe how often you see an exam, it starts with, clearly there is no contract in this case. The reasons for this are boom, 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 and accordingly there is a contract that can be sued under. You can fix shit like that, right? Okay, do a little crossing out. 20 minutes sounds like it's just a luxury, isn't it? When I wrote the exam, I wrote it on the basis that I thought you should be able to do it in 100 minutes. But I want you to spend that extra 20 minutes being awesome. How can you be awesome? You can do things like show what your point of view is. Don't just go through the formula. The issues are this, the rules are that. We apply them this way, the conclusion is this. You can actually throw in a little bit about, clearly privity is an outdated doctrine for these reasons and blah, blah, blah. Make it relevant to the question, but show anything that shows that you've thought about what you're doing. That's where you get good marks, right? So I would expect that a competent student who has done the work across the semester and who doesn't have a complete panic attack on the day, that this exam is written so that you should comfortably able to get a credit on the exam without hurting yourself, so to speak. So if you've got to this stage and you've done the work, I think it's written at that rate. I think it's a very fair exam. I'm not setting you guys up to fail. The reason for changing the exam is I'm wanting opportunity for more of you to shine. That's absolutely my rationale. Having said that, take the safe ways. Unless you are really confident, and some of you will be, and that's great. But if you're not 100% sure, take the safe way and make it easy for me to give you marks along the way. Okay, because we are marking basically on that IRAC matrix. So those of you who have done the discussion board questions along the way, or some of them, you will have noticed that there are two different marking models. One of them is just in a straight IRAC, like each question was worth 25 points, and it was equally weighted between each of them. Now, not all of these will be equally weighted between each of them because, sometimes it'll be trickier than that, and, a conclusion either follows or it doesn't, so that will have less weighting at the end of the day. Interestingly, you can do really well in more questions and still get the answer wrong regularly. Like, unless you get it stupidly wrong, if you actually identify the issues and you go through all of the steps, you can get it quite wrong and still do really well. And when you think about it, if you think about it in terms of wrong and right, every case that ever went before the High Court, the other guy thought that he was right. Okay. Give me cases. Give me cases and make them really easy for me to see. Underline them. Use that 20 minutes to go back with the highlighter and highlight them. Don't worry about using different colours or anything to determine what the hierarchy is, but just get the cases out there. I do not need full citations in an exam. I need the case name. I can't think of any off the top of my head where sometimes in some subjects you have multiple instances of the same case. Then you might need to add the number 1, number 2, or the 1989 version or the 1993 version. Here, it's pretty unlikely. Just get the case names out. I think I've said this. Oh, by the way, stick to contract law. I love how some of you get so into tort. Some people get right into admin. You find opportunities to talk about the stuff that you feel comfortable with and that you love. And I love that you love it, and I'm really happy to have a beer with you after the exam, and we can talk about the bits of the law you know a lot about that I know nothing about that you think are relevant to the exam. But let's stick to contract law in the exam. If you are unsure, write it down. So if you are thinking, oh, is this a common law? I think I just need to answer on the common law, or I need to answer on the statute, I'm not sure. Just say, tell me where you're coming from. The reality is, it'll say, I want the common law. If I say I want the common law, and I don't want the statute, I don't want the statute. I want you to work through the common law language. So if it's been overridden by the ACL, or I'm worried about how Section 18 might fudge it, I want to see your legal logic here. So again, I know it might surprise you, but this is a completely made up problem, and it actually doesn't matter whether we get the right answer or not. What matters is that I see that you use the proper legal logic. So, things to avoid. Please do not repeat the question as part of your answer. Please do make it really clear what question you're answering. Start each question, even if you only had 3 lines for the question before, start each one on a new page. Do not worry about what order they are in. I am relatively good at the numbers between 1 and 10, and so I can allocate the marks on my spreadsheet quite nicely, even if you answer them in a different order. I will be able to track that. Don't summarise the facts. What you might do in this more complex environment is you might refer to clause blah 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 of the contract. You don't need to write it down or anything. You just say clause X, clause 7.5, or all of clause 8, or clauses 14 to 13, or 13 to 14, whatever it is that you want to point to. Signpost to me. Don't waste your time writing out extra words. Eliza.
Just back on the point of the case names, is it sufficient to just say brambles, the singular word, as opposed to brambles and the other?
So cases like Brambles, Carl Hill, or Cupboard Smoke Boy, you could pick either. JJ Savage, Dick Bentley, Oscar Chess, ones where we're commonly referring to them that way. If it's some case that we haven't spent a lot of time on in class, particularly if you're being really clever and you've pulled out some brand new authority that I might haven't have not read yet, you might want to give me the whole name, because otherwise I might accuse you of just making up cases. Well, I reckon it's only fair. I make up scenarios. Some people make up cases. I've seen it done. And so, yeah, give me a full name, because I do randomly check the ones that I don't know.
Yeah.
In fact, it's more than I do actually check the ones I don't know. Sorry, Steph.
That's okay. I just wanted to clarify what you were talking about before about like when we're going with the common law or the statute, like if we can't work out which one you want, and you're saying if you're not sure which one you want to say. If it's really not clear, go with both. But if you're really worried about it, say I'm looking at both the statute and the common law because it wasn't clear to me what you wanted. Okay.
But assume if I only want the statute or I only want the common law, I will tell you.
Yeah.
If I want to know what the law is in Australia, I will be expecting you to consider relevant statute.
Yeah.
But I am telling you now with my hand on my microphone that the only legislation that is likely to be relevant is listed in the course guide. Mm-hmm. So that will be the Australian Consumer Law, really not the whole Act, but the Australian Consumer Law, the Instruments Act, Section 126, the Evidence Act, to the extent that it relates to minors, and the carve-outs that we had in relation to minors for them repudiating after the event. I'm sorry, you guys, I'm sorry, I'm actually competent most times, I really am. None of you, I'll sneeze on you if you say anything different. It's the words, they're not, the mouth, they're not connecting today. So have a look at the list of what we've actually looked at. I am not going to be expecting you to come up with some sort of, because we're talking about the NBN, for example, there might be somebody who wants to procrastinate research and understand how, Telstra has to roll out the NBN and how it works, the NBN works with the various different providers, and then goes researches and finds that Quick doesn't have an internet license or something like that. It's made up, right? I got my provider's contract. Literally, it's the contract. I went on the NBN. It amused me, this contract, no end, because that's how I get my marks. So you were the most important because you were there. And so I took their contract and I replaced the name of the provider with the word Quick. That's it. It's a straight out of the real world contract. So there you go. So I don't want you to do that. I mean, you can do that if you're interested. It'll make you a better lawyer. It'll make you a really boring human, but it'll make you a better lawyer at the end of the day, but it won't help you with your contract law exam. And right now, my promise to you has been at the very beginning that, I'm going to ramble off and tell you stories about my experiences and my thoughts, but in exchange for your patience with me there and me hopefully seeing you learn some more stuff than just is on the list, I'm going to be really super clear about what I need from you to get good marks. And this is a really strong group. I am expecting good marks. Don't miss any questions, okay? A half-assed response is better than no response, okay? Because again, I can't get my colleagues in the law school to understand the maths of this. In theory, the way numbers work is that each one, like the difference between 2 and 3 is exactly the same as the difference between 62 and 63, right? Logically, that makes sense. But the reality is the difference between 0 and 50 is way smaller than the difference between 50 and 60 when it comes to getting what it takes to get a pass. So the thing is, with these, there's lots of them, right? So if you've got 2 10-point questions and you do a really solid job on one of them and you get 8 marks for it, but you do that at the expense of not doing the other question because you run out of time, you'll get 8 out of 20 for those 2 questions. Where if you do a really solid job and you get 7 on one and you really don't know where to go, but you identify what you think the issues are and you can see what area you might look at, you might get 4. Pretty easy to get 4 and 5 if you do a 4 out of 10 if you get to that point. Okay, and so now you've got 12 marks. What did I say? 7 and 4, 11 marks. Which is a lot better than 8. 11 out of 20 is a lot better than 8 out of 20, right? Yeah. Okay, so just think about it logically there. This is not where you perfect your writing skills, right? Mm-hmm. You don't get any feedback on this. It's just between you and I don't know, the review board if we have a fight about it. But at the end of the day, let's do what you need to do strategically to get the best marks that you can. And often, the biggest distance is between 8 and 10. If we've got a 10-mark question, the biggest difference is between getting 80% and 100%. Nobody will get 100% on any of them, right? It just doesn't work like that. So these are not algorithmic questions. So there will always be, something that sometimes some of the people who get the least marks will see something that people who get the best marks don't see. So, don't panic. I'm serious about that, don't panic. I did my first exam as an adult in 2012. And I don't think I was ever particularly good at exams. I must have been okay because when I did law, everything was pretty much 100% exams. I got through. Didn't do as well as many of you guys who do in this subject. Did better than some. But actually going after living in the real world for a little while and then going in and doing an exam for the first time, it surprised me how stressful it was. Now, some of you, this is not your first rodeo, it's not your first semester. For some of you, it is. Be kind to yourselves. Take the time out. Notice if you are getting stressed. Notice and be kind to yourself and just say, actually, this is a hard thing that I am doing. It's just an exam, just between me and Kath. Let's move on. Let's just do the best that you can. Saying don't panic is like saying don't vomit or don't hiccup or something. Like it's a very automatic response. But just be aware of it and be aware that you're panicking because you care. If you didn't care about the result, you wouldn't be stressed about it. And so just have your tools to do the best that you can with it. Have I made my point? Critical response questions are often the hardest, particularly for you lovely face-to-face people who don't engage with the discussion board. Because the people who have done the discussion board questions will have had the opportunity to do two fairly rigorous critical analysis pieces. They're hard to study for because you don't know what it is you're going to be asked. I think the only way to do it is when you're going through your revision materials, just take a moment to sort of stand back and ask yourself why. Why is the law like this? Does that make sense? Is it fair? Has it changed recently? What's the motivation for the change? Why does the legislation say this? Why is it different in different places? Those are the opportunities to just, when you've got an opinion, your own opinion is gold. If you've got an opinion and it's the same as something that's peer reviewed and you can point to that, that's pretty good too. What I think is even better is if you've got an opinion and it's different from something that's peer reviewed and you can point to the peer reviewed thing and say, yeah, Justice Mucky Muck, Professor Finn, actually I usually agree with Professor Finn, but Professor Finn says all of these things about the duty of good faith. But for these reasons and these reasons, I don't think that ultimately his view is relevant in modern Australian law. Something, show me that you've got your own opinion. Answer the question. So particularly with critical response pieces, actually look at the verbs in the question and respond to them. What do you think about X? I think blah, blah, blah. Evaluate blah, blah, blah. On the one hand, blah. On the other hand, blah. At the end of the day, blah, blah, blah. I feel like I'm just giving it all away to you. So look at the verbs in the question and do what the verbs ask you to do. I don't think that there's anything else that I haven't said. Use IRAC, okay, in problem-solving questions. Take a moment. Now, you've got 2 hours, it's not a lot of time, I get that, but I am looking for quality. I don't need quantity. He who writes the longest exam paper is unlikely to win. Get the right things in. So work out early who it is that you're advising, what they actually are looking for. Assume that the fact scenarios are now, recent. Okay, I might have even given you dates in this one. Don't assume that they're a long time ago. Always address the common law. Think about whether other legislation applies unless the question tells you not to do that. Read the question carefully. Read all of the questions. Read the whole paper before you start, okay? Even if you get excited about a question, read to the very end and plan your time. Also, a little bit about every issue. A part of the way, it is a bit mathematical the way I'll end up marking this, there are certain things I'm looking for. So if I can see the evidence of those things, the more of the things I'm looking for I can tick off, the more the higher your marks will be ultimately. So a little, unlike when you're writing a piece of advice where I'm advising you to be judicious, show me with where you concentrate your language as to what really matters. in an exam, I'm happy with bullet points, right? I am happy. I just want to see what's important and have you structured in a way that makes sense. Will, you're looking quizzical or bored?
No, the last point, bullet points. What you said. You're happy with bullet points?
I am happy with bullet points. They need to make sense. I need some verbs. I need a structure that makes sense. I am really happy for bullet points, and then if you go and then renumber them, you say, okay, get all this stuff down. Now read it 1, 4, 3, 2, and I'll read it in that order. Put some arrows in, make it easy for me, okay? Like, I know you think you get the hard end of the stick. You just have to study for it and show up for 2 hours and do this. I have to read every single one of them. And, spent 30 years getting to the point where I could do that. Basically, most of these are formed like short answer questions now, so I don't know that this is terribly helpful, but it is worth noting that some of the questions might ask you to look at the scenario from an alternative point of view. So why would Quick put blah, blah, blah in the contract? Or have a look at clause X. What does it mean? Why was it included? Please don't panic. Just get on with it and be awesome. Questions, concerns, frustrations, compliments. Who can't wait for it to be over? Come on, it's not that bad. Any other questions? Okay, let's just take a 5-minute turnaround break. I'll change my slide pack.